One of the most interesting things about biopics is watching its cast rise to this enormous challenge to not just emulate, but embody larger-than-life personalities, all the while having their performance placed side by side their real-life counterparts to be dissected and critiqued by audiences. Which is an absolutely terrifying thought, but that is precisely why it is all the more impressive when a role actually lands, especially when performed by an actor you wouldn't typically expect to be cast in a particular role, which segues me right into the newly released trailer for House of Gucci and its leading lady. When I first saw the trailer, my thought was, this looks gorgeous, which is a good sign for a movie that evolves around the world of fashion and beauty. The glimpses of the plot gave just enough away to leave me intrigued, and when it concluded by flashing the name Ridley Scott on my screen, I got really excited, considering he directed many greats, including one of my favorite movies of all time. But admittedly, I was confused. I had no idea what character Gaga was supposed to be portraying, nor why the Guccis merited a movie being made about them in the first place. With my curiosity piqued, I looked deeper into the family's lore. And apparently, I've been living under a rock all these years, because, as it turns out, this story truly has it all. And it was only after getting to know all of its ins and outs that I could fairly judge a trailer for myself. So if you're like me and need a little more insight of what makes this family's story one of Greek tragedies, follow me for a fascinating tour through the House of Gucci. What we know to be a powerhouse fashion brand today originated in Milan as a modest leather goods shop back in 1921. Founded by the family's patriarch, Guccio Gucci, and later joined by 3 of his 5 sons, the business was steadily growing. And by the time the company entered the second decade of its life, it became time to expand. But while Guccio was hoping for a bigger presence within Italy, his ambitious sons had different aspirations. A move that would pay off. The family made a splash on the New York fashion scene, and their success would mark a new era for their company. Gucci became a status symbol, and their new celebrity clientele would not just elevate the brand to new heights, but also catapult the family itself into prominence. But no unit is without its conflicts, and being in the public eye meant feuding in front of a bigger audience. Their success was accompanied with a tug-of-war over power, to the point that the Guccis were at each other's throats constantly, never having any gripes about making their true feelings known to the public, who, of course, relentlessly ate up the drama. And what started as verbal disputes soon turned into legal ones, escalating to the point of Paolo turning in documentation to the US courts that would send his own father to prison for tax evasion. But this turned out to be just one of many betrayals to take place within this family dynamic. Problems were also brewing between another father-son duo, not over legal disputes per se, as much as over those of love. Rodolfo vehemently disagreed with Maurizio's decision to marry a willful and sharp-tongued young woman, Patrizia Reggiani. Patrizia was born in 1948 and grew up in the poorest suburbs of Milan, a circumstance affecting her so negatively as a child that it seeped into adulthood and influenced her decision-making.
It's true, money cannot buy happiness, this for sure. But anyway, it's much better to have money than not to have. It's better to cry in Rolls Royce than to be happy on a bicycle. That's for sure.
But good fortune awaited Patrizia, ushering in a sudden and drastic change when her mother married a rich entrepreneur, Ferdinando Reggiani, who would later go on to legally adopt Patrizia. And just like that, she was catapulted into an opulent and lavish lifestyle. However, according to the accounts of those who knew Patrizia, money alone wasn't going to be enough to satisfy her. Patrizia's difficult childhood understandably left her with the paranoid but realistic impression that what came so abruptly could disappear just as fast, and she needed to find a way to ensure that she would never be poor again. It's this ambitious aspect of Patrizia's character and the strong desire for recognition that may explain some of Adolfo's mistrust of her intentions, causing a rift between him and his son that resulted in the two of them cutting off contact for months. But this did not stop Maurizio from making Patrizia a Gucci heiress, finally elevating her to the place she felt she rightfully belonged to. Maurizio was often described as the quiet, timid one of the bunch, but you'd be wrong to let a meek facade fool you into thinking he did not have big plans of his own, and they did not include his family. In the United States, easy money was flowing into the family business thanks to the many licensing deals. The licensing deals meant cheaper items have the famous double G logo plastered on them, causing the brand to lose its prestige. Maurizio didn't like the direction the once coveted Gucci name was headed, and so he wanted to reclaim the brand's high reputation by once again exclusively catering to an upscale market. There are various opinions on what led him to this thought process. Some say his inheritance would completely change him, accusing vanity and greed to be at the core of his motivation.
We have this transformation. Mr. Jekyll became Dr. Hyde. And this is incredible, because I'm still convinced that he's a good person, but he's acting in a different way.
Others think it was genuine passion to uphold the legacy of his family name that ultimately fueled Maurizio.
It was his passion and his belief that with a new design team and with a new concept, we could bring it back to his past glory.
Then there's also a faction speculating that it was really Patrizia who was whispering in his ear, grooming her husband to be a better, more cunning businessman behind the scenes. Whatever his reasons, Maurizio was serious about his intentions and was prepared to finally make them a reality after his father died in 1983 by doing something he would have never approved of. In order to repair the Gucci legacy, Maurizio needed to sit in an already occupied chair, that of a president, and so began the process of ejecting Aldo, Maurizio's own uncle and the man who gave him a job during the fallout with his father. As if that wasn't classy enough, Maurizio used Aldo's son, Paolo's vote, to usurp him, wasting no time clearing out his desk and locking the doors behind him.
Maurizio arranged, when he became the chairman of Gucci, to remove all vestige of Aldo's contributions to the company, which is, to me, a shameful thing to do to a man who created the atmosphere for this wonderful company.
Predictably, Paolo himself did not get whatever it was he wanted to get out of this deal with Maurizio, and a nasty back and forth ensued. Just like with his father Aldo in the United States, Paolo now sent the Italian authorities after his cousin, accusing him of forging his late father Rodolfo's signature in order to access his offshore funds. And with the Italian government hot on his trail, Maurizio flees to the Swiss Alps, where he starts to concoct a plan to push his family out of the company once and for all. Because he was at an advantage of single-handedly owning half the company, while his uncle and cousins had to split their share, he decides to wield that power by buying them out one by one, with a little help from outside investors. He instructed the investors to approach Paolo first, knowing that his loathing towards his father and brothers would be enough to sell his share out of pure spite, which is exactly what happened. After that, it would only be a matter of time before the rest followed suit and sold as well. Now Maurizio could finally do with the company as he pleased, and so he begins the process of revamping the brand into high fashion. After finding out that Paolo sold his share to the tune of $47 million, his father Aldo was devastated by yet another betrayal. Not because he was surprised by his son's disregard for his family's contribution that essentially built the House of Gucci empire, but because he felt that all of his work had now been in vain. He compared selling his share to selling a body part, and unfortunately he died only 2 short years later. Paolo moved back to England and later claimed that his financial battles with Maurizio, along with the divorce of his ex-wife, forced him into financial ruin. At the brink of bankruptcy, his behavior became noticeably more erratic. Soon after, he too died of liver failure. Patrizia received the not-so-pleasant news that her husband was separating from her. She didn't hold Maurizio in high regards and had already made her distaste for him very clear to the public. But him walking away from their marriage meant loosening the firm grip and close oversight she had over his finances and company. She wanted to ensure that those stayed intact. He still supported her opulent lifestyle by providing her with a monthly allowance, which kept Patrizia content. For now. Meanwhile, Maurizio got convicted and then acquitted on appeal of all his charges. And by 1993, with Tom Ford as his designer, Gucci has indeed cemented itself as one of the top names on the catwalk. However, entirely revamping a company is a costly endeavor, and his decision to rid Gucci of all its licensing deals alone cost the company $100 million. Maurizio himself wasn't exactly the modest spender in his personal life either, especially now that he had a new woman in his life, social life Paola Franchi. According to reports, his personal finances took a loss of $40 million. In an attempt to stop the hemorrhaging, not even 4 years after becoming chairman of his own company, Invest Corp made the decision to fire the last Gucci from his family dynasty, giving him $120 million for his share. This left Maurizio with no other choice but to slash Patrizia's monthly allowance from $150,000 a month down to $90,000. A move that would no longer leave his flaunting ex-wife indifferent. Quite the opposite, actually. She was furious enough to solicit random people to get rid of Maurizio, who not only jeopardized her finances, but also her status in affluent society. In 1995, at 8:30 in the morning, as he was entering his office building, Benedetto Ciraulo walked up behind Maurizio Gucci and fired 4 shots into him, before disappearing back into the busy streets of Milan. It wasn't very long until the police turned to Patrizia as a suspect, and 2 years later she was sentenced to 29 years in prison, of which she served 18. Today she still lives a pretty affluent life in Milan, seemingly not very sorry for what she's done. Familiarizing myself with this tragic downfall of a family over money and power really built up my anticipation for the release of this movie. Judging from all of the interview footage I've seen and the short clips from the trailer, I would say that Gaga is showing a lot of potential of being capable of pulling this off. Of course, I am reserving complete judgment until I actually see the final product, and I hope everybody else does too. It's clear that she's trying to leave her own mark on the acting industry, and I think she's proven herself enough to at least warrant a fair shot. This is a great opportunity for her to do so.